that I have in my hot little hand.
Oh, wow.
Wow, thank you. It's something I've worked on for, I don't know, at least 4 years, probably 5. I'll say this, the book results not from a desire to write a book. I do have that desire, but this came from a desire to understand the mind. And I just went to all these psychology classes and never really got answers that I was satisfied with. And then I met this man who you maybe can't see. That's Jay McClellan, my co-author in this book. And his work was profoundly influential. And then I started bothering him, like, how come, Jay, we don't know about this? Or people in general, especially even psychology professors, perhaps especially psychology professors, don't know about the neural network view of the mind, which for me is the only framework I have seen that allows one to understand what the mind is in a mechanistically explicit way. And that's what this book is about. It comes from curiosity. It just comes from what motivated me to get into psychology in the first place. So it's, of course, on Amazon and elsewhere. I'd be delighted if you tell me what you think if you get a chance to read it. All right, that's the announcements. And the main attraction, and I'm dying to hear this, is Takuya. And Takuya, you've been thinking about goals, and we're going to think about goals with you.
Hello guys, I'm Takuya. This is an incredible turnout, and I'm so excited to be presenting today. I feel very honored. Yes, so I'm going to be presenting about goals, and I kept the title very simple because I'm still in a very development stage of my research. Things can change a lot, but this is something I'm certain about. I'm researching goals. I like to talk about goals. I think about goals all the time. I'm sure everybody does. I like to see people achieve their goals. So this is my presentation.
Or change them and learn from them.
Yes.
If they're not achievable,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So a brief intro of myself. I was an undergrad here until last year, and I met Professor Suri during my time here. I subsequently took all of his classes he offered to the undergrad, as people do here. So data science, cognitive psych, and cognitive neuroscience. And he really sparked a flame and a curiosity that I've always had. I really like ideas, and I like to think about like more abstract things. But when I took his course, it was a very concrete way to understand these things I always thought about. So it really inspired me, and that's why I'm here. So I want to first thank Dr. Suri.
Thank you.
And then I did a little bit of research assistance for Daniela, and that was a really fulfilling experience. She just presented last week about the perceptual decoy effect, and just getting to have that experience in person, running experiments with participants, was surprisingly very, very fun and fulfilling. So I say this to anybody who's interested in research. I think if you have the opportunity to either be a participant or to help a researcher out, I would say go for it. You'll get to see what it's like. And for me, it was something that confirmed, like, I want to pursue a master's here. So my topics of interest is decision-making, more specifically goal-oriented behavior or motivation, and language. Language is something I'm naturally just interested in, but as it pertains to my research, it's a tool, it's a means for research. And I'll get to explain more of that in a bit. Yeah. So these are some of the big picture questions that I have. These aren't research questions. How do goals arise? This can be something survival or more abstract goals. So a goal can be something as simple as, I'm hungry. I need some food. How can I get food? You know? Or it can be something more abstract. I want to be a psychologist. Goals are what motivate us, and it's really fitting the introduction today. We talked about goals. It's what guides us, but I'm curious about what motivates a goal. How do they come up to begin with? And then the second one, what is meaning? meaning more in the sense of like the linguistic sense, not like meaning of life, but more like in language, what is meaning? How can we operationalize and manipulate the semantic weight of language? And in line with that, I'm curious about what gives affective intensity to language. These are very big picture questions. This is a more focused question about the project I'm working on. It is, how does the salience of a goal affect persistence and choice? So salience is synonymous with prominence. So how a salience of a goal is how strongly a goal stands out in your mind. So how does salience affect one's ability to persist through a goal?
So for example, the word salience is salient because you bolded it.
Exactly. Thank you for noticing. Persistence is also salient. I just want to warn you guys, I'm going to present a lot of background information. It's probably pretty easy to digest, but there's going to be a lot. So if at any point you get lost, feel free to just raise your hand and ask for clarification. And since I'm in the development stage of my research, I would really, really appreciate it if I want to encourage that kind of discussion.
I would too. Generally, for sort of newer people in the lab, we want like a conversation. So if you're thinking, gee, should I ask or not? Everyone here wants you to ask.
Speaking of questions.
Yes.
What do you mean by semantic weight?
Semantic weight, just like how meaningful a word can be perceived, but depending on the context, even if it's the same word. I'll get more into that later, but I'll try to provide a better explanation for sure.
A quick question.
Yes.
Is persistence can it be synonymous with motivation? Like the motivation to complete a goal?
Motivation, persistence is defined as the ability to, I don't want to say persist, to continue a task despite the difficulty and the lack of rewards. So regardless of not being rewarded or there is a challenge, you can persist through that.
Okay.
So it's a little different from motivation, but it's very much related.
So motivation is defined. This was in my head as well. I'm so happy you asked this. So motivation is defined as the processes that direct and energize behavior. So direct meaning, are you going towards or away from? That's the definition of motivation. Processes that direct and energize behavior. Energization can have various downstream consequences, right? Persistence can be one of them. So persistence is not the same, as Takuya nicely said, as motivation, but the direction and energy of motivation leads to persistence.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. So yes, we're going to start with the background information. So if you guys were here last year, I presented a little bit on this, and I'm going to try to briefly go over this. Everyone who's in the lab received an email about reviewing the trolley problem. But I'm going to explain the trolley problem, how it relates to concepts in my research. Who here doesn't know about the trolley problem or has never heard of it? If everyone's... So I'll do a brief, very brief,
Assume that there's
concise.
people lurking who don't remember what the trolley problem is.
So the trolley problem is, this is a situation that's posed to a participant. So there's a train track. It diverges into two tracks. There's 5 people on the straight path. There's 1 person on the divergent path. That is you right there. And in front of you is a lever. So currently, if you don't do anything with the lever, the train will pass through its straight path, its regular course, and effectively it will end the life of 5 people. This 1 person's life will be unaffected. You have the option to pull the lever. If you pull the lever, the train will go to the divergent path, effectively saving the lives of 5 people for the cost of 1 life. And then the question is, how justified would pulling the lever be? That's a question that is used in a lot of moral research, moral decision-making research. And there's a lot of variations of the trolley problem. And but this is a way to see how people view morality. And if you can notice, for there's two choices. There's the non-action, so do nothing. So if you do nothing, it's going to go through the straight path. And then there's the action. If you decide to pull the lever, your personal action is directly responsible for taking the life of this one person, versus the non-action is more of a passive decision. You're not doing anything, so your inaction is responsible, but you're not directly manipulating the world to influence the results. So, that being said, the non-action is considered a deontological response, and that just means it's based on personal values, duties, and emotions. So a justification for non-action might be, I must not be responsible for the death of one's life. So I won't pull this lever because if I pull this lever, I am directly responsible for killing this person. The action, pulling the lever, is considered a consequentialist response. That's based more on logic, think utilitarian. Justification for that might be the ends justify the means. So I'm aware that I'm responsible for taking this person's life, but in effect, I've saved 5 people. So I've saved more people, therefore I'm justified. Do you have any questions there? So this is where it gets interesting. So the foreign language effect is about, they conducted a research on a population of bilinguals, and research has consistently shown that bilinguals are significantly more likely to endorse the deontological option. So that's the don't pull the lever. That's a value and emotion-based response when the problem is presented in their first language. Does that, everyone's okay with that?
So how strong are the effects? I just don't know. Are they strong effects? Do you know?
So from what I've read, they're strong and significant. The way they scale it is they don't make them choose between one option or the other. They ask how justified they are. So the rating for endorsing, like it is justified on a scale of 1 to 7, is significantly higher. I forget the exact amount. Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, when we do stats, there's 2 measures that are important. One is called null hypothesis testing, which will answer the question, is it true that people in their native language choose differently from people in their non-native language? That's a statistical test. It's called null hypothesis testing. You get a p-value. By convention, if the p-value is less than 5%, you say, yeah, it's different. Or if it's not, you say we don't have evidence. You can't reject the null hypothesis. There's another statistical test called Cohen's d. And what Cohen's d does is measures the difference between the sample mean that you're interested in, which in this case is the mean of the people on this score in their native language, versus the mean of the people in their non-native language, divided by the standard deviation of the population. Right? So that gives you a measure of what is the effect size, how different are they? So the p-value is answering a yes-no question. Are they different? It could be very different or a little different, right? So Cohen's d is what you do in cases like this when you're interested in knowing what the difference is. Okay, cool?
Does it matter like which languages were spoken? Was there a difference? Like English, Spanish, or like Chinese, Russian? If there's like effects between those pairs?
It's been replicated across a lot of languages, and the ones I've read, Italian, Chinese. In Chinese, the effects were smaller. English, Spanish it's been replicated, and there's some cultural aspects to it and translation aspects. I'm sure that Chinese, it's harder to communicate that exact kind of nuance through it, so there might be a problem there. But it's been consistently replicated, not just in like 2 languages. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Have they replicated this with people who aren't bilingual, just to see what people who are bilingual are?
It's, I don't.
How would you do that? Like it's one versus the other.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's a between subject. So just you need
Oh, I see.
you're comparing the first language and the second language.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, what I
conditions.
mean is that is this just always the first language, or is it the fact that they're also bilingual and it's their first language? That's what I'm trying to just determine. I'm curious, right?
I don't. Let's just make sure we understand the question. So, Mark, there's two groups here,
Yeah.
right? One is given the prompt in their native language,
Yeah.
and the other is given the prompt in their second language, right? And it's a comparison between two groups. That's what it would be.
More likely.
So, so you couldn't possibly do it with people who are not bilingual because you can't. The population is people who are bilingual. That is the contrast term.
But I will touch upon a method, kind of, later in my later slides. Okay. Did you raise hand? Sorry.
Well, let's make sure. Does that
No,
make sense?
that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious, like, what's like a baseline, I guess. Just like,
Oh.
what people do in general.
I
right?
see.
Oh,
why I was
that's the
asking.
question. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
With that, there's so
Do people
there's no
choose-
like a standardized. Yeah.
Well, on the website you showed me, it shows a number for all the choices, right? Observe
Oh,
trolley
yeah.
problems, right?
Yeah, there's an interesting website but it's not really
Scientific.
scientific.
But
you
in
can see
general,
it.
more people
Utilitarian.
will take the action. They're consequentialists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
My memory is 3/4 of the
Yeah. But that's hard because when they present this to participants, they don't ask them to endorse one, or it's just a rating scale. So that's where it's like it might not be standardized in terms of how they rate.
So they're not actually making the choice; they're justifying.
They have to make a choice on both. They make a rating on both,
Okay.
and
Got
they
it.
compare the rating. And it's been a while since I've reviewed the research. This is just like the background that I'm framing my study on. Hey, Bella.
There was a lot of information that relates to my question just there.
Yes.
I guess the question now is, are they more likely to endorse the deontological option over the consequentialist option, or just they're more likely to endorse the deontological option compared to other people?
From the paper I read, it was over.
It's
Yeah.
a unipolar scale. If you
Yeah.
do one, you're
Yeah.
doing yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So endorsing implies that they would.
It's more
they didn't make
justified.
them choose.
It's more justified.
Okay.
They think it's more justified.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Was the justification on just like a number scale, or did they actually
Is-
ask them to write a response
There's-
as to why they specifically?
Mhm.
I don't recall
No.
exactly. But there was the number scale.
Yeah.
I have to look back at the research. They might have asked for a written justification
There
for
would
it.
just be a lot of like qualitative stuff.
Yeah.
But I feel like that would be kind of interesting to see their
That would.
written responses of.
In their
why-
respective languages too. That would be interesting.
Yeah, because then they get their
Yeah.
nuances across.
I just want to underline something that Takuya did, which I really liked. Jasmine asked a question. Takuya didn't recall the answer, and you nicely said, "I don't recall," and that's much more helpful than having a guess. And I'd like to applaud you and resolve to have that mindset. Like if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? That's okay.
There's a lot of things I do not know. Jesse?
One question that I have, and this might also be something that was from what since you said you read it a while ago.
Yes.
Do you know if there is a difference in how people responded based on how different their second language was and then their first language?
How-
We're talking about like if their first language was subject, verb, object, format, or if it was subject, object.
I have no idea. They did control for proficiency, and they did a lot of surveys to see like what age they acquired the language. And to be clear, they have a specific criteria for what a second language is. If you're proficient enough,
Mhm.
second language and native language become blurred.
Okay.
So they purposefully did not let like people who are proficient in both languages take this
Gotcha.
part in the study, and that's a very big distinction.
I guess
Um,
just to, clarify
yeah.
what you meant, it was like more like, you said people who were, who had a second language in Chinese, were more likely to pick one option, and Chinese is a very different language,
Yeah.
talking about Cantonese and Mandarin is a very different language from
Yeah.
English. If your first language is English,
Yeah.
Mandarin, Cantonese are very different languages. From
There's a lot of confounds in the study, especially for Chinese. I feel like there's such distinct languages
Yeah.
that you can say culture, you can just say the language itself, you know. So it's definitely a place that you can do more research. It might be that there's less of an effect, or like, but yeah, I don't.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
question.
Go for it.
Kind of building off that question, is the base language always English? Like, is it always English and another language, or is it a mix of bilingual?
I haven't. The ones I've read have been English, Italian, English, Chinese. I haven't seen one, but I'm pretty sure that it's been done. I'm not sure of the results, but it's been done between different languages that aren't English. Yeah, but I'll look into that. Thank you for the questions. It feels nice. All right, so that is the foreign language effect. And the implication of the foreign language effect, I'll start with the interpretation. Language has an effect on our neural circuitry. The networks activated by specific languages are different, thus resulting in different decisions. Native language processing correlates more with emotion and value-based processing, while second language processing correlates with more logic and utilitarian processing. And this is just a more concise way to say it as it relates to what I want to do with this information is native language activates circuits more associated with emotion processing compared to the second language.
So what do you think of this, Takuya, and why, if you believe it, why are you inclined to consider it seriously?
I think this is going to relate to the salience of a goal. And if I may, it relates to what I want to study because by manipulating the language that, assuming this is a true effect, by manipulating the language you present a set of instructions or words, you can manipulate how emotionally salient those words are in a given prompt.
So I'm working on this hypothesis, and
Yes.
I want you to tell me if this is sensible or useful, or I should dismiss it.
Yes.
That when we're young, we have emotionally intense experiences much more so than when we're older, where life sort of starts to fit into much more of a routine.
Yes.
When we were kids, we're bullied or we're bullying or our mom's saying something or it's fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? So at that time, our exposure presumably was in the native language. And so we have tighter links between that vocabulary and grammar structure and our emotional responses compared to when we're older and we're using it from the second language from a functional perspective. What do you think of it, and is that sort of the philosophical underpinning of this effect?
I think that's consistent how I interpreted why that occurs, where a lot of times most of our emotional development occurs in our native language. And when you start to learn a new language, it starts off as like more of a translation process that occurs. And as you get more familiar with it, you might become more natural. But it's a very logical, it takes kind of an extra step to express yourself. I don't know the literature behind the theories of why they see this effect, and I'm sure it's something that needs to be studied more. But that's a great question. Go for it.
In the literature that you read,
Yes.
like whether in the trolley problem, like this specific problem or beyond, but still in the same scope, did any of the researchers specifically ask for and analyze for the age of learning their second language on the
Yes.
strength of the effect?
Oh, on the strength of the effect.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any data on the age versus the strength of effect.
Do it.
That would be really cool. Yeah, I'm gonna write that in my notes. Age acquired and strength of effects. But They always, for any kind of bilingual study, they always ask for, during the survey, how proficient they are. Then that's like standardized test scores, or especially age of acquisition. That is, but that's, and I can get data. I don't even have to
Yeah, I feel like
conduct it,
it already
right?
exists, right?
It's somewhere. So I'll write that down. Thank you. Age of acquisition. Yes.
Just one extra thing. Have they done any research on people who use sign, who are deaf, versus people who use sign, who not deaf, versus people
These
who
are
sign,
great
who
questions.
have
I'm sorry.
implants?
I wish I had a equally as good of an answer, but I haven't
So Jesse,
seen.
what would the hypothesis be? So that the effect would apply.
Well, the hypothesis would be.
So these are people who grew up doing sign.
Well, there's a bunch of different ways you could do it. You could look at people who grew up using sign and also using sign if they had deaf parents, because some people
Yeah.
use sign if they had deaf parents. You could
Uh-huh.
look at people who grew up using sign and also have cochlear implants. And the
They
age
grew
that
up
they
learning.
got cochlear implants, because that also has an effect on
Mhm.
what their hearing is and how well they understand
Wow.
the
Cool.
words.
I think if someone does this, it will get published. It's,
Yeah.
it's an
Yes.
interesting
Yeah.
question.
Please get inspired. This isn't just my stuff. Go for it.
Similar to that,
Yeah.
you mentioned that one of the ways that they filtered out participants for the trolley problem study was that they had to make sure that they weren't too familiar with
Yeah.
the language. Have they replicated this study with people that are bilingual but have equal or near equal two languages? And if so, was the effect as big?
I feel like an imposter on this topic because I haven't read. To me, when I read that, I just logically thought like that makes sense,
Yeah.
because I'm someone who speaks English and Japanese.
Uh-huh.
I acquired them at the same
Yeah.
age around, and I read that and I thought like, oh, that makes sense that they wouldn't,
Yeah.
because I can't distinguish between which one is my second language. That's already something that I feel like would disqualify me for that study.
Yeah.
But that's a good question where they can try to see if there's an effect. What does it mean that there's a difference if I were to take,
Because then
you
we
know?
could see if it was specifically the language that they're using or
Wow.
the time at which they're acquiring a new language, maybe, or their
Like subtract
proficiency.
as a control.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Do you think then growing up where they grew up and I guess when they acquired both English, like in your case,
Yes.
English and Japanese, if you grew up in like America learning both of them versus growing up in Japan, is kind of like the cultural impact. I wonder how that would still affect it based on like where you grew up. Versus
I'm
the language
sure it
itself.
would have an effect, but
I guess it's not.
yeah, it's a very,
that's a different problem.
it's, yeah, with these things, there's so many factors that you just can't control, but
Mhm.
it's worth considering when you interpret the results that you get.
Mm.
I think Brielle had a question. Answer? Okay, sorry.
I'm just, you did mention that they've repeated this study
Yes.
all throughout the world. right?
All throughout,
Has it been repeated like internationally?
Yes,
Because then,
yes.
then if it is, then I would imagine that then it shows that it doesn't really, the cultural
the culture
effect
aspect,
is less
Yeah.
strong than any language effects, right?
yes.
Because now you're like, oh, in Italy they started learning Italian, and then they learn English, right? And then, wherever it is, that difference is going to be kind of washed out by that if they're seeing this event, seeing this happen internationally.
That's a good point, yeah. It removes the context of culture,
Yeah.
but then, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe this is just my personal perspective kind of coloring this weirdly. I don't really understand what you mean by manipulating the salience of the goal, because for me, when I think of what I was raised in a household that spoke Tagalog and spoke Cantonese. So I know certain foods, for example, I know two different ways to say the same name of the food, and depending on what where I'm at and how what my mindset is, I specifically go for whichever one I grew up with and had more exposure to one food versus the other, but I know the name of both of them. So one is more salient to me depending on just context. Is that kind of what you're going with here?
This,
How you're separating those two, thinking of salience?
I feel like I'm really glad you brought up salience. This is a question that I was gonna talk about too. But I think in that situation, that's a much more concrete example of like, name this fruit, know the fruit in both languages. When it comes to morals or in more kind of fluid, abstract thinkings, I think you will see an effect, start to see an effect of how much do you agree with this statement, or how much, you know, it's more manipulable because we don't think about, it's less concrete. It's not yes or no. And that's why they didn't make it a yes or no question, like, are you going to pull a lever or not? They're trying to look for how does their opinion on something get influenced by which language they're,
So, okay.
yeah.
So then, like, kind of on top of that, I don't
Yes.
maybe I missed it too. Like, how are you going about like fluency and like understanding, like, you know, does the person really are they able to understand and communicate that? Yes, in second language, like, you know, if I did it in Chinese, I
Yeah.
definitely do not have the language skills for that.
Yeah.
But if I could, like, you know, how would you know that I have that ability to like think about it in the same way that I do in my native language, which
Yes.
is English?
That's why I'm here. I need help from you guys to. I'm still in the development phase of this. I don't have any kind of cemented, like, this is how I'm going to do my study in design, but that's something that I'm like trying to really focus on. And it's a big confound for me. And I want to, I'm excited to present about other ways that I might be able to manipulate salience, and that's part of my presentation too. So I'm really glad that you asked that question. Yeah.
I was also gonna piggyback off what he said, and like how with like the words and like the meanings, and I think for myself as like when someone talks to me in Spanish, I'm like trying to correlate all the logic and stuff of what I'm like
Yeah.
learning. But then I'm also thinking like when I go to like what do you call it, to like a Latin market, and I go up and I want to speak in my like the Spanish language, so maybe they'll be like nicer to me, or they'll have more of a connection, understanding with me than more logical. So it's just like, how do you determine or distinguish between the two?
Sorry, I didn't completely
Well, there's no
understand.
social piece here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I totally understand your point, which is we sometimes do for cultural acceptance,
Yeah.
but that piece is kind of missing from this initial design. But that's something to keep in mind for future sort of studies. We're talking a bunch, and I know you have a lot to tell us. So you gauge when you want to start taking questions.
Sorry, I want to do both at the same time, but I'm going to try to keep going. A question I had, or like I would ask here for this, so by studying the bilingual population, randomly assigning them to a native and second language condition, and instructing them to perform a goal-oriented task in their respective language groups, theoretically, we can manipulate the salience of a goal. And a question I would like to propose is salience of a goal the same as emotional salience? Because we're manipulating first and second languages, and we're saying first language is more emotionally charged. I think a logical question would be, does that mean the goal itself is more salient? And I want to try to answer that. I think that's my answer is a nuanced yes for this. Because goals and emotions go hand in hand. This is coined by me, motion in emotion. I'm going to make a t-shirt one day. And we don't think hunger, we feel hunger, and we look for food. We don't think pain, we feel pain, and we try to avoid it. A lot of emotions that occur automatically, or a lot of goals that we have that are more survival, that occur automatically, they start with emotions. So emotions play a vital role in the realization of goals, which guide our behavior. So that being said, by manipulating the emotional salience of the instructions, it's an assumption that we can manipulate the salience of the goal. And that's where I'm still figuring out how sound that is to base my research on. But the more I think about it, I think when you first are given a goal, it's a very much an emotional experience rather than a logical experience.
To be fair, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
But your study may not be directly answering that question, because you may test whether people are more likely to persist with goals when they're provided in their native language versus when they're not. And these ideas are very suggestive of why that might be the case, if that is the case. But your direct test is a question about language and persistence, which are observable behaviors, rather than the paths through which that effect, if it exists, comes about.
That's a good point. So the implication the information I would get from that test of bilinguals and goal persistence, what would the conclusion be?
If it turns out that bilinguals are more likely to persist with a goal in their native language, that will force us to ask why in ways that the previous, I don't think the trolley problem does, and it'll require future studies to test the hypothesis that you're developing here.
Okay.
And the first thing you're testing
Is there an
is there goal persistence in native language, right?
That's
And so
really
the other stuff is sort of hidden.
that's very comforting to hear, because I feel like I need to try to understand everything before, but it's good to just see the effect first. So
Yeah, see if there's an effect.
that's very solid advice. Thank you.
By the way, the word emotion comes from the word motion. You're not the first, so the derivation of emotion in Latin.
The-
Okay. Question.
yes.
So, in the task, like the unsolvable puzzle / anagram task,
Yes.
I think the fact that we know that it's like we as researchers
Yeah.
know that it's unsolvable makes us think like, oh, well, since it's unsolvable, they need to be like super persistent because there's no reward in the end.
Yes.
So why would they do it if not for persistence? But is the theoretical idea of completing a puzzle that they don't know is unsolvable not a reward to persist towards?
That is.
Or like for
if-
in the example of like enduring pain. Like I
Yeah.
know, because I've done a few research studies where it was like, sit here and clear your mind for 2 hours. And I'm like, I'm gonna die from this.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, if I was put into a room and they said, put your hand in this water, see how long you can do it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to be the best at putting my hand in water.
Yeah.
That seems like reinforcement, because if they're like, if you're sitting there and you're waiting and everyone's sitting there waiting, it's like, that's reinforcing that I've been here for a long time and I'm doing a good job at hand in water.
Yeah.
How, like, yes.
I tried putting my hand in ice water,
Yeah.
and it was not fun.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So like, and that is a concern of like floor ceiling effects. Everyone going to the max
Yeah.
value, and that's something that I need to consider when designing. But in terms of like, if someone told me to do it, maybe in the context of research, I might push myself. But it's not fun.
Yeah.
So like, I hope people don't push themselves too hard. Yeah, but that is a great thing that I have to consider. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna quickly say, isn't that kind of one of the research problems in general? Is
Yeah.
participants trying to be the best participant?
Yeah.
And so then you kind of just, like, it kind of washes out eventually over just a bunch
Yeah.
of individual things.
So that's where I have to be careful with how I phrase the instructions to not motivate them too much, but also get them to try, and so.
I was gonna say, I think like the self-rewarding aspect of this is still consistent with persistence, because unlike the boring tasks, right?
Yeah.
Like in the way that you want to test it, persistence and goal-oriented behavior is motivated behavior. That's
Yeah.
self-rewarding, like by nature. But question overall about, I guess the cold pressure task is there like a level you can get to where it is like damaging? Is there a cutoff?
They say 3 minutes.
Okay, 3
yeah.
minutes. And do people reach that level?
People do, but I have to look at how often they do. I'm sure there's data on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be interested in that,
But-
because you could even like offer, you could show like not, or tell them that there will be a reward, but like have it written in their native or second language, and the first time they actually like are privy to that reward is
So I'm lost with the reward part. Like
Well, it would kind of have to depend. Like say the one who stays in the longest, right? Like
Yeah.
you could really lean into that idea of things, but then like with the 3 minute cap, there would be a worry about ceiling effects.
I'm hoping that I don't want the participants to try for an external reward, I guess, because persistence is kind of like the lack of reinforcements. It's just how. So I want to mitigate just this. Yeah, I need to think more about that, but that's. Yeah.
And then second to that, I was just curious, and maybe I'm like totally losing the plot here, but do you want there to be a moral element in terms of how or that ties into persistence, or is that separate?
No, there's no moral element. The moral foreign language effect was to show that there is an effect on language speaking, but it just showed the emotion processing versus logical. Yes.
Is there a functional difference between stubbornness and persistence?
This is personal opinion. I think there is, but not scientifically. I don't know.
In your opinion, what's the difference?
Like
I'm not asking like is like stubbornness is a bad thing, persistence is good. I'm just asking like if someone is more stubborn, for example, if they're interacting with someone in their native versus second.
I think stubbornness is more out of ego and trying to be right. This is personally. Persistence is more just like a self-control, like I determined to do this task. That's where I make the distinction, but there's a correlation probably somewhere there. But I'm not sure. That's not scientific.
One thing I want to add here is, actually two things I want to add here is, one is we think that words have precise definitions. They don't. They only get their definition from usage. Second is, in usage, we often speak of persistence with respect to goals, where stubbornness need not be.
Thank you. I will move on to my next slide. Yes, we got over this. Yes.
Yeah, so you say like in the salience we will like manipulate the salience based on the language, right?
Yes.
Is there like any like data that shows us that salience gets manipulated through language?
This is the assumption. Actually, maybe the question is wrong, where I'm more focused on looking if there's an effect, like Professor Suri said, and maybe I might not be asking the right question, but my assumption was through the foreign language effect, one is more associated with emotion processing, and based on another assumption, that means the goal is more salient if the instructions were presented in this language. If that makes sense.
I would recommend that we think about influence of goals rather than salience of goals.
Influence
is
of goals.
it true that goals are more influential when presented in L1 versus L2?
Yes.
Salience can often be visual salience, and there's cold cognitive aspects which we're less interested in. But let's admire the beauty of Takuya's design, right? I mean, there's a language effect. It's being done in a moral domain, and here Takuya is asking, because of his interest in language, does this lead to producing goals that are more influential than goals in another language? Never been done before. I think I'm dying to know the answer. We don't know the answer. There's reason to believe that there is yes, but again, nobody's done the science.
Thank you. I'm glad I didn't title my presentation Salience of Goals. I just left it goals. This is exactly why. Like, I'm not, and this is my early stage of research, so I'm very fortunate to have everyone's opinions. But I'm learning a lot. So that is the review of it. Hypothesis. I'll be working on the hypothesis again, early stage. So what I'm thinking so far about the design, participants, since we are in the Bay Area, we have a lot of Spanish and English speaking bilinguals, and they'll be recruited through the SONA system at SF State. And what we would do, I think I went over this, but we'll instruct participants to submerge their hands in a bucket of ice water, which is controlled at a certain temperature, for as long as possible in a randomly assigned L1 native language or second language condition. And we measure the time. There might be other things I want to consider measuring. But for the most simple explanation of my design, we're going to be measuring the time. And we want the instructions to induce motivation. So it doesn't, if I was trying to put myself in the situation where I'm going into as a participant and some researcher just tells me like, put your hand in the ice bucket for as long as you can. I don't think I'd be motivated to do that. So I've been trying to think of ways to induce motivation in the instructions. And before I continue, there's that 3-minute time limit. After that, it becomes dangerous. But the participants aren't going to know that. They're not going to know how long they're going to be. There's no clock that's monitoring how long their hands has been there. They can count. But if we tell them 3 minutes is max, they might want to go towards that max. So to avoid that, I think it's appropriate to just say, give them like, present them, you know. And
what do they do with the trolley problem?
It was text only, no figure as well. So that's a good, yeah.
Do we have any previous experiments, any literature any part of the body of knowledge that says whether spoken versus read instructions have different, I guess to use language you've been using, different salience? Like, are people going to be more motivated or less motivated to do something if they read the instructions versus hear them?
I haven't read anything on that, but I think I need to go to your office hours because you ask great questions. Thank you, yeah. I'll look into that. But, wait, sorry, did you have a...
I was just curious, do you want them to be proficient in both languages, or do you want one to be a clear second language still?
For the bilingual actor, I would want them to be fluent in both, but participants, it has to be strictly one's native and one's second language. Yeah. But if you notice, there's... Go ahead.
Building on that, could we use participants that are fully fluent in both as sort of a control group?
Yeah.
Or even people that only speak one language?
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. I will sit with that thought and think more about how I can apply that. But that's a really good intuition. If you notice, with every single option, there's a bunch of options to choose from. Each one has its strengths and weaknesses. So video with a person, that's going to be the most emotionally arousing or effectively, because you're speaking language with all of its modalities. The visual, the audio, the facial expressions too. And in theory, you would see the most effects. But it also introduces the most confounds of gender, race, and just the perception, the accents. That's all going to get kind of add noise to the effect. And then for audio, you can eliminate the effect of the visual or the confounds of visual, but you still have some confounds. So as you deduce it to something that's more consistent, at the same time, you might just see less of an effect, and that's what I'm trying to find the right balance. Where can I land? And I think for now, audio with text is something that could work, but that's just out of gut feeling of what can be the most consistently applied instructions without where I can still see the effect, because a lot of language is tonal and communicated through auditory. Yeah.
I think if you're looking for the widest possible range of people that would consider themselves bilingual, text only is gonna be much easier to work with than, for example, audio only. Because a lot of people that say oh, I know a second language, they're oh, well, I can read it, I can write it, but it's really difficult. I mean, you're bilingual.
Yeah.
You probably know it's really hard for some people to pick up verbal fluency.
Yeah, let's get more opinions on this. Other thoughts, Jessica?
I'm wondering if it was text only, but part of the instruction was for them to read it out loud to
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'll take notes.
And what's the thought there?
Well, you said that you wanted to like control everything, but you also wanted to be able to see an effect. And I kind of agree that language is very tonal, but like with an audio recording, you're gonna have like different accents and like different genders maybe. And so if they're reading out loud, it's in their accent, it's with their like gender, like all that sort of stuff, and you might have that increased salience just from like them speaking
Wow.
as well. I don't know. That's the thought.
Wow. Yeah, I took notes. That's a outside the box way of thinking from my perspective. Yeah.
If we don't hire a bilingual research assistant for this specific, like English and Spanish,
Yeah.
someone mentioned this earlier, like the switch from just being like, "Hi, welcome in. What's your center research
Yeah.
number?" Blah, 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 into like Spanish video instruction would be really jarring.
Yeah.
Like the most jarring by far.
I completely
But even like all this and then into text, because if you're testing for like a first versus second language, if they said like, "Oh, Spanish is my second language," and you give them instructions written in Spanish, even though it's their second language, they're gonna be like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, I have to work a way around that.
There
Yeah.
has to be a smoother transition, I feel
Yeah.
like, between the two. If it's not the whole thing is a research assistant.
Does anyone have ideas?
I feel like it wouldn't be that jarring because you're already entering a research study. You know that there's going to be kind of a set rules, there's going to be a specific way of doing things. So I think as long as you say, hey, we're going to give you like this is our instructional video. I think you can kind of let it transition naturally, and if it's already their second language, it probably won't be that jarring for them because they still know the language.
I guess if we adequately like mask the actual intent of the study, or if you adequately mask like what you're actually looking for,
Yeah.
it might not be as like tipping off to like, oh, they're
Yeah.
trying to look and see if my second language is more
But also,
salient.
what would be the problem with them knowing about their second language? Are they going to be able to manipulate something without understanding? Like, I guess I don't really
Well,
see.
I think let's get thoughts from people who haven't weighed in yet.
Jay?
I mean, I think you're already seeking out people who are bilingual, going out of your way to have to test those things. So I feel like it's kind of built in, you know, there's kind of a hint of what might be going on.
Yeah.
It's a dilemma for sure, but I don't think it would be too jarring.
I think
to just switch
it's-
to a certain language.
if possible, a bilingual research assistant, but if not, it's a fight that I just have to not prioritize. But that is a big concern.
I wouldn't be too concerned about it just because like they're already going to have to read through an entire document, and they're very baseline questions of like it can be as simple as like, now that you've reviewed the document, start when ready, let me know when you're done, the screen is already up. Also, just the testing alone is going to be like so intensive because to categorize people in that way is super rigorous. Like I know just the bilingual testing alone is like a multi-page document of testing that has to be reviewed.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, I think if you're worrying about just the presentation of it by the like research assistant in general, you then have to like worry about a whole lot more from
Yeah.
that. I don't think it's worth trying to narrow that section of it down when you have so many more elements
Yeah.
to consider.
Thank you. Yeah.
May I just hold on to your thought? I just want to weigh in on one thing, just because I think this is a good thing that applies to many of your designs. In any project design, there will be nearly an infinite spectrum of choices, the way we're seeing in this room, and the comments are fabulous. One guide that science has established for itself is to build on prior methods, right? So there is this thing about a creative science where you must make changes because you're trying to do something new, but where possible, you go with methods that you have been used in the past. And get clear, you're the CEO of this, you're going to decide what meets your research goals. But one factor, one consideration would be what's being done in related experiments, such as the Trog experiment. And if that was text-based, then we change that if you feel like it really had huge shortcomings, right? And be able to justify that. Because the going in assumption is always you're extending what's been done before. Sorry, Kate, to cut you off.
No, yeah, it's okay. I was just gonna say, like, at least when I read like the different methods that like you're considering for like how are we going to present this to the participant, if we're doing with like Spanish, at least from my perspective, is like someone who has Spanish friends that took Spanish class and like has certain family members that do speak like Spanish fluently and English, like I've at least also come across like as a person who grew up like with a different language at home and then in school like I'm surrounded by it too, like in different contexts. There's also the idea of like heritage speakers being a thing, where like you grew up with a certain language at home and you speak it in at a home context mostly in audio form, but then when you're presented with a document that you have to like translate for your parents, it's like, well, there's a lot of technical words that you don't know that you can't really translate.
Yeah.
Like for even at my work, we have translators that are like random staff members that have like some language proficiency, but they have to look up a bunch of words because we have a lot of technical documents at my job. It's like you got to talk to this like client and their parents about like something really technical in like that you don't use every day. Like that's
Yeah.
like when I went to Mandarin classes in high school, people falsely assumed that because I grew up Chinese speaking Cantonese that it would somehow transfer over, but that's just not how that works.
Yeah.
Because they're two different languages, spoken versus written down. So like, even something like that, where like you're bringing bilingual speakers that may have some level of proficiency, it may be audio more than literary,
Yeah.
for example.
So that's where I thought that audio accompanied by text would be the best answer.
Yeah.
And it was just like to make sure that it's not just one, because listening and reading are different skills. And I thought audio, those are like the most basic ways we interact with language. And to control or like at least measure if that's, like after the experiment, there will be a survey that asks about how much they understood and the instructions, and there will be like a whole nother way to measure that. So but that is a very big thing to consider.
I think what I remember you saying you were kind of like apprehensive about using an AI or
Yeah.
a kind of like Siri, Google Translate
Yeah.
type voice. What is your reasoning behind that? Because from what I can tell, it would eliminate some other confounds such as emotionality in voice. A lot of times when you're having somebody read something, directions in linguistic research, they have to read it in a very monotone voice.
Yeah.
And that's intentional to kind of remove that factor.
I think in terms of consistency, it's probably the smartest thing you can do to just have it like calculated.
Mm-hmm.
But this is much more of like a personal take on it, where I feel an unease when I interact with content, like a AI picture.
Mm-hmm.
So far, it hasn't gone to the point where I'm convinced that it's real.
Yeah.
Like I can tell it's
I
generated,
wasn't advocating for a picture.
Oh no,
I think a
no.
picture would be very,
But
very
in general,
strange
and even
to
with
consider.
speech,
Yeah.
I've interacted with content where like, oh, I can tell there's
Yeah.
something that's unnatural about it, and I don't want that. Like
Yeah.
at this point, you'd be kind of testing like how much do you trust the instructions, and I don't want that to be a
But wouldn't that be
factor.
the same across both
That would-
the
yeah.
native language and second language, so that could also kind of
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
But
So Takuya, we have about 10 minutes.
ooh,
Where do you want to cover the content of the message? Where do you want to go next?
I was really excited to. This is very much something that we went over, I feel like, through the discussions. Confounds, I think we ran over. These are the confounds, and there's a billion more. Confounds, proficiency of language and translation, those are, and the participant, research assistant. But if you start naming the confounds, there's going to be a lot. But this is basically where I am at in terms of this project. But I recently had like an aha moment. I was like, ah. And we're going to switch gears, and I hope this isn't too much for you guys. But I really want to briefly go over this. This is a very brief Japanese lesson. Japanese, there's 3 writing systems. We use this thing called hiragana, kanji, and katakana simultaneously when we do text. So hiragana is basically the alphabet. It's the most basic form of the writing system. Each character represents a phonetic syllable. So hiragana, that's what it says. There's no semantics involved in each character. And then there's this thing called kanji. you can tell that's more complicated. These are characters that were directly adopted from the Chinese writing system. Each character represents its own concept. For example, this character alone is Kan, and that means China. This character means letter. So together, it means the concept of kanji. But by itself, it still contains the meaning of Kan or China. By itself, it's a letter, but together they kind of bring the concept of Chinese, or not even Chinese words, just the writing system. So they can mean different things when combined to form a word. This is kind of irrelevant. It's only used for foreign loan words. So if I want to say McDonald's, it would be written in katakana, McDonald's. But I was just thinking about how do I manipulate the semantic weight of like words. This is what I'm talking about. And I thought if you manipulate of the characters. So this is forest and fruit, basically. But this activates, in a way, a bunch of other things that are related to forest, kind of subconsciously. I'm not thinking about a forest when I read this.
That's interesting.
But there's a lot of ways. If I do forest and I'm trying to think of a word that would contain this. If you change this, it'll just mean something completely different.
Bird, like a forest bird or
Forest bird,
animal.
yeah. But there's kind of a whole nother web of connections that exist with only the kanji.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Mark, this relates to the rural heart network.
Yeah.
So I guess almost like an English like game, it in itself can like have like underlying things of like what could a game be defined as, kind of similar to like the symbol itself.
Yeah.
Has like.
What's even crazier, is that even within the symbol, there's implicit meaning where this right here means something that's liquid or water, and this happens to mean cry. And this on this side, this symbol means tree. So together, there's parts to it. But I don't think if you get, it's a really interesting and cool system, but.
So then when you learn kanji, do you learn the multiple semantic meaning of the symbol? Or are you learning it in the context of like that is like the symbol?
It's it's very much just like you get exposed to it and you develop like, oh, I've seen, like you have to look it up when you're reading a book. In elementary school, you do learn about these pieces, the most basic pieces.
But it's compositional, is your point, right?
Yeah.
It's compositional in the sense that there's forest and fruit.
Yeah.
And so it could be forest and something else.
Yes. And then but if that's written like this, there's no association with forest. Yeah.
So there's less nuance with that.
Yeah, the semantic weight from how I've experienced the language feels like it's been manipulated, especially if it's like a more emotionally charged, like if you write something like a letter to somebody. It can be a stylistic choice, but it can also be to use more hiragana to sound different. But it's essentially, you're not changing any of the core logic or the phonetics of it. And that was a big problem with translating two languages. So this is something that I got excited about. I'm not anywhere. This is more of like a future perspective thing I might be interested in. I mentioned in a previous slide that I'm going to skip over.
One other thing is, this is like definitely, if you're worried about the number of people in the Bay Area you can conduct on, then this definitely makes it even worse. But I think since you're not manipulating the phonology of it, it's interesting to look at it with people who have dyslexia, because people who have dyslexia have difficulty with phonology or difficulty learning how to, new words, because they have difficulty translating from text the phonological meaning of the word, going from phonology to semantics, pretty much. It'd be interesting to look at how dyslexia factors into that as well.
So now we need people with dyslexia and who know
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's
But listen, I wanted to say a few things before we enthusiastically clap. what a superb presentation, Takuya. Thank you. I want to bring your attention to 3 things that I think Takuya did really well, because I learned from what you did, and I'll incorporate this in my presentation. One, the slides were not bursting with text. They were clean and they were beautiful. They were readable. They invited reading. So I think this was a key thing you did marvelously well. Second, I think that notice how Takuya just invites conversation. This is very hard to do. Not all of us do it naturally, because when some of us present, it's like, don't bother me because I'm chasing my idea. And something about Takuya, your personality and openness, and it helps that you're in the early stages and so you're not as invested. That really helps. But I think all of us can do a little more of that. And I think the third thing that I really appreciated was not being scared to bring in this idea, which is related but not exactly on what you're doing, because it makes us think in a richer way. I think I really appreciate what you did. So thank you.
Thank you guys. I learned so much. My brain is fried, but I learned so much.
That was a rich conversation. So thank you for all who participated, and we'll do more next week. Who's speaking next week? I'll update you on that. That was very sad. I really appreciate that. I think this is going to be such a great project, and I want to encourage you to at least think about. I don't usually suggest this, but parallel studies.
I would love to. I feel like in terms of the interest, my motivation working on this is like.
I just think there's neural network models I could do from your second study. So I'd encourage you to please think about it.
I'll think about it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Dude, it's been so long. It's so nice to see you. How've you been?
I've been alright. I got a lot going on, so I wasn't able to make the first few, but I'm glad I made this one. I really
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Yeah. There's so many people that showed up. I was like, oh my god.
real lively now.
It wasn't like this last week, so.
How you doing?
That was really fun. Thank you. Yeah. I was very nervous at some points, but I eased into it, and everyone's just like very asking like relevant questions. None of the questions were like off topic, so that was amazing.
Really cool. Can I hit you with a random
Yeah.
idea for something completely different?
Of course.
I think if you were looking to include moral judgment in a research task, not so much persistence but consistency, it'd be interesting to have them do like, say, fictional rulings on court cases, like within different languages, because you could do that within subject. It could be completely randomized, and then in the way that like jurisdiction happens, you know how you have like recommended sentence from like 10 to 15 years, 10 to 20 years. You have like maximum and minimums.
Yeah.
You could simplify it to be like, someone did this. This is the
there
sentence range. What do you?
I'm assuming this is a method that's been used for moral decision making before. This is a method that's been used.
Yeah.
Like this kind of there's just wow.
Like that would just be really
fictional,
cool.
yeah,
'Cause
fictional
you could
court casing.
randomize it. You could randomize it in direct translation, as well as have a baseline for people looking at languages, because the baseline would be actually set by those who get it.
Wow.
Well, that'd be really cool to see if people are consistent
Between
within participants and
wait.
So like you could say.
Are you talking about? Is this for the Japanese? No, these are for like the language, right?
Just like language and because what I was immediately thinking is though I'm really interested in obviously like what you're interested in as well. What I was thinking about is the change from what was the first word you used for moral judgment based on emotion?
Deontological.
Deontological versus utilitarian judgment. What I was interested in is it actually more salient, or is there just effortful processing going into this? Because if it's effortful, it could therefore be more salient than naturally understood.
That's where I had a very like big question mark too, where I was like, just because it's more emotional, it also doesn't mean it's more like you that's answering it. Logical you is very much you too.
Emotional. It also could be less like
Less processed or like less like
less considered generally because like there's no effortful like re-engagement when you get the time to understand. Yeah, I think that would be really cool.
Oh, so you're saying that natural language, your native language is less effort because you're not processing it? That's a crazy.
I think that would be really interesting to test in moral judgment to see if there's like the same pattern. Because then you would have like a full range to basically back those studies in a way that's not so like strange. And it's also personal.
Yes. That's crazy. That's a really fun follow-up study to do. Hi, how are you guys?
So it's really the shame that you can't use the Japanese example because I feel like that sort of like more encompasses like saliency compared to using the more like probably accessible and the more accessible the population of people who are bilingual for Spanish. Because I'm doing experimentation on salience, and right now one of the main one thing regarding my studies I found is that like salience has like affects it, like sometimes affects things kind of differently. In a allergy paradigm, they try to use like different types of foods for saliency, including like goat eyes compared to like an apple. And what they found out they contradicted with another salience experiment, which they found that like salient food actually had less of an effect that was more blocked than like than the normally affected So as compared to like other studies in which like the salience effect was actually more effective at being unblocked. So I feel as though like things like you mentioned more thematically like forgot the word.
Like semantically,
I guess semantically prevalent. When you feel more sent to me than like compared to first and second languages, because for someone who like has a second language in English, in the Bay Area, a lot of people use English dominantly, and so you'll have a lot more semantic weight to it.
I think, that's hard.
It's hard.
Bye. It's something that I just like came up with, and I haven't put enough thought into it, but for a memory.
It sounds as though, like how you described it, is a lot better of an example for comparing salience.
I think so. It's cleaner.
It's cleaner.
It's so much cleaner.
Also, there is Japantown if you're looking to like get participants outside of the
but I don't know how research works outside of SF State. That's the only like thing that because like Sona's is the way, and then so I might just have to go to a Japanese university and be like, please do this research for me. Let's see how Suri's charisma works. Stanford. So, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Your fist bump. Yay! Thank you. I appreciate it. What was that? How are you? I was so excited. I was very nervous too, but I was like really.
You were nervous?
I was very nervous.
Like you were nervous. It seemed like you were so curious and you wanted to know and I was just like, I was so like interested. After the Japanese part, I immediately like while he was still speaking, I go to Duolingo.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm so happy. Like, and I'm sure you can relate to it a lot because like bilingualism and just like. And when Professor Singh was talking about her studies about the romanticization of, I think, Hindi or Tamil, I forget which language, but that was just like, that's so in line with like the semantics she was talking about that.
And it's really amazing and important that we do these things, because like Not a lot of them have been done. And then
Yeah.
I'm so impressed that I'm like looking forward to where this goes.
Thank you so much. Yes, let's see it. I thank you so much, and everyone, including you, asked such like relevant questions where I didn't feel like every question I was like listening, and I was like, oh wow,
That's interesting.
you know, and I was like, I didn't think about that. So it was amazing. Bella was a superstar too. I think I need to go to your office hours of just like, what should I do? When is your office hours? Seriously.
I'm free after like. Call me at work.
Okay.
Say like, oh, who's this? Be like, Sophia, I got questions. Thank fucking
Yeah.
God. I'll be here.
No, but it was very much a presentation that it just felt natural, and I was just naturally. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I hope you have a nice weekend.
You too. Have fun.
Bye.
I came over just to say you cooked, dog.
Thank you so much. You cooked.
No.
If I'm the chef, you're the sous chef. You're the sous chef.
Alright, I'll take sous
Yeah,
chef. I'll
sous
take
chef. Sous chef. It was fun. I was so nervous, man. Oh.
I came in and you were killing it.
Yeah.
You were honestly killing it.
There's so many people showing up.
So many, yeah.
Real likely.
That was crazy. I took a picture of everyone, guys.
Maeve saw me licking some sauce off of a soy sauce packet, and I'm really hoping that wasn't the picture you got.
Let's see.
Retake it. Photoshop it.
Oh no, but you're eating your
They
sushi.
get the sushi, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was like probably 15 seconds or less away from licking the.
Oh, I think I got it.
You did?
I think in the next one.
Oh my god.
Oh,
Oh my god.
I got it live. Oh, actually, we're doing this live. We're doing this live.